Alright, this is a playthrough from the CavesA. This is a white box for the rough version. The player just came back, well, the player just came in from the plane, whatever you call it, the destroyed airplane, and then they find the caves. So as they get in the caves, they find a camp where there's trace of all the survivors. Among the things from the survivors, they will find a letter or like a document written by Salim that mentions that he is following the pilgrim's path, hoping to find a safe place, I guess. I'm not sure. But basically this is gonna give the goal to the player, find Salim following the pilgrim's path. On this area here, the player will find some form of like tomb from one of the dead people from the crew. The player keeps exploring, and they found a lit up torch. Someone was here recently. Of course, this is all temp text that I put. So this is the pilgrim's path. The pilgrim's path will have some form of signs on the walls. This is all very temporary. This is the entrance that now it's being covered by the sand. So the player follows the pilgrim's path, and they realize that the passage is blocked again, and the only way through is through the deep caves. So the deep caves is the area where we're gonna teach the FMS. As the players step in, the FMS will kick in. It's dark, so the player starts getting the darkness feedback. They can see though like some light. There's been like Salim following this path. So the player decides to follow the light. As they explore the light, the wind comes in and everything becomes dark. At this point, the player basically has to create some light, and as soon as they will create the light, the fear, the FMS will stop being so hardcore. At the same time, you can see that the player will have the effect, the vignette effect on screen. The player finds this door. They can go through here, and here we are tutorializing the safe rooms. This safe room will have a lock. Right now it doesn't have it, but the player locks the door, and as soon as the player turns on the light, the player will get progress, and they will see that the screen effect disappears. This safe room will be some form of how do you call it? Sanctuary? Not sanctuary, it's not the right word. But like a Tininan kind of safe place. They find some resources, and they eventually decide to dive back into the deep caves. They get some more scary events, and as they emerge from the other side, they find what seems to be like a pool of blood. This pool of blood would be ambiguous. Is it Salim's blood? The player can decide to follow the path, getting more fear, obviously, and the path will lead to the carcass of like a dead animal. In this case, they will get some more fear, but at the same time the player should get some form of reward. We are still thinking how to handle this. We're also considering having some form of a small struggle here. The player goes back following then what is more obviously Salim's path. They cross through the bridge. But as they go through, they have to follow the pilgrim's path. There probably should be a lit up light over there. And as they go forward, the bridge breaks. Tassi hits the ground or like rolls down. And as she wakes up, she's injured. She's walking a bit slowly. She has like a lot of fear. And this is gonna be some form of like small nest for the ghoul. And the player is getting more and more fear. The player might see the corpse of one of the other survivors, but eventually we are forcing the permadeath here, as the player cannot create light. The permadeath sequence will not look like this because it should be much more toned down, so to say. When the player wakes up, they are in a new part of the cave. The player keeps moving, and as they reach this area, the amulet starts glowing. This needs to be fixed a bit, but the player basically follows the amulet. Tassi comments on the fact that the amulet seems to be reacting. There's like signs of some weird collide, like rocks that don't belong here. And the player eventually finds a rift. The rift is open, and this passage should not be just cave, should be like a kind of like stepping through the dark world for a bit, like few meters, I guess. They emerge from this other side of the cave, and they find the level door to the dark world ledge. Okay, so the player just came from the dream sequence. So the player went through the caves A, then the dark world ledge, then the dream sequence, and then waking up in the caves B. So the player is back into the cave system. And they will be in this kind of dark room. We discussed a bit about changing this layout, but for the sake of it, I will keep going with this one, I guess. The player removes some obstacles to find an opening. As they find the opening, they can see the torch lit on, and Tassi realizes that there is a sign of, it was Salim moving through the pilgrim's path. So the player is back in the pilgrim's path. This is some form of black stone blocking the player's way. The player keeps moving and find that their way forward is collapsed. There's no way that they can reach that other part of the pilgrim's path, and their only way is to slide down. They can find some form of object. They will not only see this one, but also some more stuff dropped by somebody. So as they slide down, they get a flashback. Basically the point is that the bridge collapsed because as Salim was going through it, and Salim dropped a bunch of things, among which the doll. This is Alice's doll, like the doll belonging to their first daughter. The player can decide to pick up the doll. They keep basically now the player knows that they're getting closer and closer to Salim, and they see some light at the end of the tunnel. So the player the players rush through the caves. They go through the passage, but they sadly find the dead body of Fairchild. Now, the dead body of Salim. So at this point, the player can find a suicide letter in which Salim explains that he was wounded, whatever, and that he it's just like the most important thing is that here is when Tasi knows that she's pregnant. Together with Salim, there's like some light sources, but also a lantern. If the player goes through this area, it's gonna be extremely dark. So this is when we are introducing finally the lantern. The player gets rid of some blockage. They move back up. Seems like they found their exit. And yes, they do find their way back into the pilgrim's path. Technically, if they go through this bridge, they will go back to the area above, like where they had to slide down, and here they will just find the door to the end of the level. So this CavesB is going to be much more of a narrative, small narrative map, I guess, focused on Salim. And this is it, I guess.